In this PowerPoint, we're going to look at advanced objects. So remember that objects in JavaScript are containers that store data and functionality, right? So we're going to build upon these fundamentals of creating objects, and then we're going to look at some more advanced concepts. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is the this keyword. Okay. So objects are collections of related data and functionality, right? So we store that functionality in methods on our objects. Okay, so we have something like goat as an object, okay, and then goat's diet type, the key, and the value, herbivore. And then goat has a method which writes bah. So in our goat object, so we have the make sound method, right? So we invoke the make sound method, goat make sound, okay? But what if we wanted to add a new method to our goat object called diet that prints the goat's diet type? Okay, so we have the diet method here then, and we want to print or log diet type. Okay, and diet type is here. So you would think that it would print or log herbivore, right? But it's going to be a reference error, and it's going to say that diet type is not defined. So why is diet type not defined, even though it's a property of goat? That's because inside the scope of diet method, inside this scope here, we don't automatically have access to other properties. So we don't have access to properties that are not inside this method. Okay, so that's where the keyword this comes to the rescue. Okay, if we change the diet method to use the word like the keyword this, then this method is going to work. So if we say this diet type, then it's going to print out what we expect, which is herbivore. So this keyword provides access to the calling object's properties then, okay? It references the calling object, which provides access to the calling object's properties, and the calling object is goat, right? So by using this, we're accessing the goat object itself, and the diet type of the diet type property of the goat is by using the property dot notation. Okay, so let's take a look at arrow functions and the this keyword. So in the previous exercise, that for a method, the calling object is the object that the method belongs to, right? So if we use this keyword, get my highlighter. If we use this keyword in a method, then the value of this will be then the calling object, okay, which is goat. But this becomes a little bit more complicated when we start using arrow functions for methods. Okay, so what happens in arrow functions then? Let's take a look. Okay, for example, we have, again, diet type, herbivore, we have make sound, okay, log bah. Then we have the diet type, that we have the diet method, okay, diet, right? So we use this so that we can access the property diet type, but now it's printing undefined. Okay, why? So what happened? Note that the diet method is defined using an arrow function. That's the only thing that has changed, right? So an arrow function inherently binds or ties an already defined value to the function itself, meaning to the function itself that's not the calling object. Okay, so in the code snippet here, the value of this here, the value of this right here, okay, is in the global object, or an object that exists in the global scope, okay, which doesn't have a diet type property and therefore returns undefined. So accessing and updating properties is fundamental in working with objects, as you can see, otherwise it return undefined error, right? However, there are cases which we don't want other code simply by accessing and updating an object's properties. So this is when we get to privacy. Privacy in objects is the idea that only certain properties should be mutable, which means we should be able to change in value. Okay, so we're gonna talk about privacy right away. So using an underscore, certain languages have privacy built in for objects, but JavaScript does not have this feature. JavaScript developers follow naming conventions that signal to other developers how to interact with a property. So one common convention is to place an underscore before the name of a property to mean that this property should not be altered. Okay, so underscore amount means you should not be altered. Okay, this is not intended to be directly manipulated. However, it is still possible to reassign the amount. It's, you can still reassign it if you really wanted to. You shouldn't, but it's still possible to. You can still reassign the amount here. Okay, but this underscore means that you shouldn't. That's the whole point of the underscore. All right, so later we're going to cover the use of methods called getters and setters. Both methods are used to respect the intention of the properties prepended or that begin with the underscore here. Getters can return the value of internal properties, and setters can safely reassign property values. So for now, we're changing properties that don't have setters or getters. So getters are methods that get and return the internal properties of an object. They can also do more than just retrieve the value of a property. All right, so let's take a look at this code here. So first we use the get keyword followed by, let me just get my highlighters. So we use the get keyword followed by the function. Okay, so we have the get keyword and then followed by the function. The if else condition here checks if both first name and last name exist. In this case, it does, right? Then we access the calling object's internal properties using this. Okay. So in full name, we're accessing both. So here in full name, we're accessing both. Sorry, the full name is here. Let me just so full name is this, right? This property here. Let me just kind of take everything away so we can see. So in the method, there we go. So in the method full name, okay, over here, we're accessing both the first name and last name, okay? And in the last line here, we're going to call the person's full name, okay? So in general, getter methods don't need to be called with a set of parentheses, okay? Synthetically, it looks like we're just accessing a property. So the advantages of using getter methods is that getters can perform an action on the data when getting a property. Getters can return different properties using conditionals. And in a getter, we can access the properties of the calling object using this. The functionality of our code is easier for other developers to understand as well. So properties cannot share the same name though. When using getter and setter methods, properties cannot share the same name as the getter and setter function, because if we do so, then the method's going to result in an infinite call stack error is what it's called, okay? So don't use the same name. A workaround is to add an underscore, right, before a property name, like we did in the example above. Okay, so setter is what we're going to talk about next. Setter methods reassign values of existing properties within an object. So let's take a closer look at that. Okay, so we can perform a check for what value is being assigned to underscore age. Okay. When we use a setter method, only values that are numbers will reassign this age. there are different outputs depending on what values are used to reassign age. So to use the setter method, setter methods like age don't need to be called with a set of parentheses, okay? And synthetically, it looks like you're just reassigning the value of a property. So the advantages is that, like getter methods, there are similar advantages to using setter methods, right? Like checking input, performing actions on properties, displaying a clear intention of how the object is supposed to be used. So even with the setter method, it's still possible to directly reassign properties. So in the example below, we can still set _age directly. Okay, so far we've been creating objects individually, right? But there are times where we want to create as many instances of an object quickly. So a factory function is like a function that returns an object, and then it can be used to, it can be reused to make multiple object instances. So factory functions have parameters allowing us to customize the object that gets returned. Okay, so we have something like this monster factory. It's got 4 parameters and returns an object that has the properties name, age, energy source, okay, and the method scare. Okay, so here we have monster factory is a function. It has name, age, energy source, and it says here catchphrase. Okay. So let's go take a look. Calling the factory function. To make an object that represents a specific monster like a ghost, we're going to call the monster factory function, okay, with the necessary arguments and assign the value to a variable. Okay, so we have ghost. Okay, we're going to create the object ghost using the monster factory function here. Okay, so the name goalie, and then 251, and then ectoplasm and boo. And now we have a ghost object as a result of calling monster factory with the needed arguments. So let's talk about property value shorthand next. So ES6 introduced some new shortcuts for assigning properties to variables known as destructuring. So in the previous exercise, we created a factory function that helped us create objects, right? We had to assign each property as a key and value, even though the key was the same as the parameter name we assigned to it, right? So name, age, right? And name and age are the parameters, and the key and the value are of the same name. So the shorthand way would then just to write name and age, okay? Because they're the same anyway, right? So instead of name, name, and age, you can just write name and age. So this is the shorthand way. So we often want to extract key value pairs from objects and save them as variables, okay? So for example, here we have the object vampire, which has which has the name property Dracula residence, and then we have another object inside of it, which is day and night property. So to extract the residence property as a variable, okay, let's go get the residence property as a variable, this one. So residence, vampire, residence, okay, with the dot notation. We can also take advantage of destructuring a technique called destructured assignment. In a destructured assignment, we create a variable with the name of an object's key that is wrapped in curly braces and assign it to the object. Okay? And this is the same as residence, vampire residence. So grabbing nested properties, we can even use the structured assignment to grab nested properties of an object. Okay? Like vampires, preferences.